So the 8th Circuit will now review the GOA and 17 state lawsuit, which is against the ATF and their new frames and receivers rule. So let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think the ATF needs to be abolished, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also want to mention that recently I released a podcast episode. It's over on the second channel, which I will link down below in the details section, in the comment section. I did a podcast with my friend Jared from Guns and Gadgets. It was an awesome conversation. We talked about YouTube, 2A advocacy, and also the ATF's new rule on pistol braces. So if you're interested in that, you can watch it using the link down below. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we will be discussing the Gun Owners of America and 17 state lawsuit against the ATF and their new rule on frames and receivers. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to do a quick update on the California handgun roster case, Rena v. Bonta, and the hearing that happened this last Friday. For everybody that's been asking me, I just wanted to put up a quick update, so if you're interested in that, stay tuned for the end of the video. But the main focus of this video is going to be the Morehouse v. ATF case, which was filed by GOA in 17 states. Recently, GOA filed an appeal up to the 8th Circuit, and that has just been set for a hearing. This appeal to the 8th Circuit was filed just a couple days after that federal judge in North Dakota denied a motion to enjoin the enforcement of the new rule, which has now taken effect and went into effect in mid-August. GOA, along with the 17 states, was trying to convince this North Dakota federal judge to recognize how this ATF new rule does in fact violate Second Amendment rights. However, the district court judge did in fact deny that motion and instead agreed with the ATF and found that this new rule on frames and receivers did not violate the Second Amendment and also was not implicated by the Supreme Court's recent ruling in Bruin. Now, I know some of you may be interested to know who those 17 states are, and the 17 states who have joined this lawsuit are Arizona, West Virginia, Alaska, Arkansas, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. Now, for those of you not aware of what this lawsuit entails, this lawsuit is against the ATF because of that new rule on frames and receivers. This new rule by the ATF is essentially a restriction on the sale of 80%ers or unfinished frames and receivers. Under this new rule, 80%ers are treated to actually be firearms. This new rule went into the regulatory definition of a firearm and changed the definition through a web of references in the regulation so that now 80%ers are actually defined to be firearms. Since 80%ers are considered to actually be firearms, they are now going to be subject to serialization requirements and background checks as well. Recently, we also saw that the ATF submitted an open letter to the public essentially saying that unfinished polymer frames like the Polymer 80 and the Lone Wolves, in fact, sold on their own, these unfinished frames sold on their own, can in fact fall under this rule's restrictions. This is contrary to the actual statements by the ATF in various lawsuits, including the Vandersock case. The Vandersock case is in a federal court in Texas, and in that case, the ATF said that no, these items would need to be sold with jigs, instructions, drill bits, and things of that nature. But now all of a sudden, through this new open letter, they're going back on that very statement. But that's generally the gist of what this final rule on frames and receivers did, and that's what's being challenged by GOA. This case was originally filed in a North Dakota district court. It's a federal case, and GOA requested that the district court judge there, in fact, grant a motion for a preliminary injunction, which would stop the ATF from enforcing their new rule, which was set to go into effect on August 24th of 2022. However, on review, district court judge Peter Wilt found that under Bruin and other concepts, an injunction was not warranted in this case. Therefore, he sided with the ATF. In this decision, he stated, however, as recently as 2 months ago, the Supreme Court declined to weigh the government's interest in regulating firearms, which distinguishes Heller and its progeny, at least to some degree. As an initial matter, while not specifically argued by the plaintiffs, the court believes the ATF's response to the Second Amendment concerns brought up during the notice and comment period in the proposed rule was sufficient. As noted in the final rule, concerns regarding constitutionality of the proposed rule were raised by multiple commenters. The ATF appropriately responded by indicating its belief that the proposed rule was consistent with the Second Amendment jurisprudence at the time the final rule was drafted and explained why. It is difficult to fathom what more the ATF could have said in response at the time, as it could not predict the future development in law. Turning to the substance of Bruin, that case concerned an unconstitutional proper cause requirement for issuing of a concealed carry permit in the state of New York, quite distinguishable from the facts here. Nonetheless, the question is whether the final rule would pass constitutional muster post-Bruen, whereas the court reads Bruen, an individual's right to keep and bear arms for self-defense may not be arbitrarily denied by a state. From the outset, however, it is crucial to note the final rule concerns the commercial sale of firearms. The final rule does not infringe on an individual's or business's ability to completely manufacture a firearm for personal use, nor does it restrict the ability to obtain the weapon kits at issue. Instead, the final rule simply requires serialization of a firearm when in the stream of commerce so that it may be tracked in the event a crime is committed with the firearm. There is a long-standing distinction between the right to keep and bear arms and commercial regulation of firearms sales. As such, in this court's view, the final rule was and remains constitutional under the Second Amendment. So the judge in that case originally believed that the Bruen decision does not impact the ATF's new rule, since during the notice and comment period, the ATF made claims and responses to why they believed the Second Amendment was not implicated by the rule. Here, the judge simply seems to defer to the ATF since they made some sort of vague claim that the Second Amendment is not implicated. Another concerning thing this judge did was he tried to cabin the Bruen decision as if it only impacts proper cause standards and carry permits. Here, the judge fails to recognize that any restriction on the sale of items can in fact violate the Second Amendment. It doesn't take a complete ban on the sale or the possession of these items to actually violate the Second Amendment. So GOA is asking for the 8th Circuit to reverse that incorrect decision. In fact, recently the 8th Circuit has set a hearing for this very review. The arguments will take place on Tuesday, March 14th of 2023. The case will be heard by judges Stephen Colton, Michael Meloy, and Raymond Gruender. I believe all three of these judges are in fact appointees by former President Bush, so that is a positive sign that maybe actually we will get a positive ruling by the 8th Circuit panel that's reviewing this issue, but we will have to wait and see. So we have an important hearing on the ATF's frames and receivers rule that's going to be coming up before the 8th Circuit. This will also impact some of these other pending cases like the FRAC and 25 state lawsuit against the ATF's new rule on pistol braces, which is also pending in the North Dakota federal court there. A positive decision in this Morehouse case could also help to stop that pistol brace rule, so this is definitely something we will need to keep our eyes on. Now, the last quick thing that I want to mention for everyone in California who's been asking me about the Rena v. Bonta California handgun roster case and the hearing that took place on Friday, February 10th. Some people seem to think that there should have been a ruling on that day or that a decision happened that day or was supposed to happen that day. I just want to make it clear that that was a preliminary injunction hearing and it was on the handgun roster case. From the attorneys at FBC and those that I've talked to, they told me that the judge seemed that to be very positive, that it went well. The judge appeared to be asking a lot of good questions, which seemed to indicate that he was very in tune with the issue at hand, understood the issue, but there was no ruling from the bench. A ruling from the bench on a preliminary injunction hearing is very rare, and so you should never really expect that that's going to happen. Really what happens is usually a few weeks, few days, whatever, after the fact, after the hearing, you will get some sort of decision. So the hearing happened on Friday, and now we're waiting to see what ultimately the judge decides to do. But once we get a ruling, I, of course, will let you all know. So that's where everything stands. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment down below, and I will try to answer the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of two-way news. As always, I want to thank everybody who likes, comments, subscribes, who hits the notification bell, who shares these videos. You guys are directly impacting these videos, impacting this channel, and helping me to reach and educate more people than I could ever do on my own. So as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.